even though I had worked so much and so hard and long and was climbing the corporate ladder, I really didn't have very much to show for it. And I was a bit burnt out. And that was my big wake up call where I realized I had to figure out all this money stuff for myself.
Hello, I'm Karen Roth, FY25 President of the Society of Women Engineers. Welcome to Diverse, a SWE podcast. Be sure to subscribe to Diverse on your favorite podcast platform, and if you love these episodes just like me, you can help us reach even more engineers by leaving a 5-star review. Today we're diving into all things money for engineers, including how to build a strong financial foundation so you can have more freedom throughout your career. We have the perfect guest to talk to us about this. Sandra Park is a financial coach for women in STEM as well as an active SWE member. She's an electrical engineer by training who has worked on programs such as the F-35, and she was most recently a chief systems engineer. Sandra, this is going to be a fun conversation. I'm looking forward to learning a ton from you. Welcome to Diverse.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've listened to episodes of this, and it's a huge dream come true to be on the podcast.
Oh, it's a huge dream come true for me to be hosting. But let's set the stage here. When we talk about financial independence, what does that mean? And why does it matter so much for women in engineering specifically?
To me, financial independence means freedom over your career, freedom over your life, freedom to pick where you want to live. Money is such a tool that enables you to truly live the life you want. I call it engineering your own life, your own path. And with women being, in a male-dominated industry, and we still have issues with gender equality, I find a lot of women in STEM tend to be the breadwinners of their family. I think it's even more vital that they really understand and manage their money very well, because to me, it goes hand in hand with a career also. Because I've found that when people start making better money decisions, not only does it trickle into they have a better life financially, it enables them to have a career they want, to not stay in toxic jobs, to make that career pivot that they wanted to do, to maybe go on a sabbatical for amount of time or pursue a higher education and not have to go into debt. So to me, they go hand in hand. And I wish that everybody could learn so much more about their money, because it's really so freeing for opening yourself up to a much bigger life and, of course, a better career in the process, too.
I really appreciate that and can relate to that very heavily. Living where I want to live near family, my community is really important to me. And, as I do job transitions, I always have this flash of like, well, what if we live somewhere else? It was just a little bit easier to find a job. But then I have a flashback to it doesn't matter though, because that we are financially savvy in terms of those meanings. So I really appreciate that kickoff. So Sandra, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, your SWE involvement, just to set the stage a little bit for us?
Yes, yes. So I actually wasn't very involved with SWE in college, which was such a shame because it was at my university and I was not very involved in it. I became involved more actively with SWE more recently in maybe 2023, 2024 timeframe. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. I'm actually a native of this area. I was born and raised here, and I still live here. So I'm active with both the Dallas SWE chapter and the Fort Worth SWE chapter. I went to the national conference last year, which was incredible, the best conference ever. I highly suggest everyone should go. It was eye-opening to be at a conference with over 20,000 women. And then not only that, I had the honor of being picked as one of the speakers. So I got to speak about financial freedom and independence for women in STEM to over 500 people, which is another really cool experience. And just the more I feel I contribute to SWE, the more I get out of it. More recently, I was involved with the SWE Dallas Professional Development Day, which is like a really cool kind of like one-day mini conference. So it's really affordable. People can get a conference professional development type experience locally without having to fly anywhere. Yeah, and I also became a senior SWE member last year.
Oh, that's awesome. I certainly can relate to feeling like the more I put into SWE, the more I get back out, but I'm probably a little bit biased from that perspective.
Yeah.
So let's swing back around to this finance topic. I think it's really telling that there were so many women that wanted to come to your session at We24. So can you tell us about any personal financial wake-up calls or learning moments that you can share of what really got you into this area?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I feel that everyone has to go on their own personal finance journey, and I definitely had my own journey. I went to college and I paid for it myself. I actually went through debt free, working 2 to 3 jobs while going to college and community college. I finished in 3 years. And then I started my career as an engineer. And I found that when I transitioned to working as an engineer, I didn't really know how to handle money very well. Even though I was making a really good amount of money, most I've ever made in my life, and even up to the point where I hit the 6 figure mark, I still was living paycheck to paycheck. And it's not that I was going so drastically into debt, but I also felt I was just paddling. I was just treading water. I was working to pay the bills so that I could work and pay some more bills and not really getting very far ahead. I didn't understand how to save any money. I wasn't really building any investments. The little bit of investing I did, I was horrendously bad at it, doing it myself. Um, so it was just a wake up call when I left the first company I had worked at ever since I left college, my very first engineering job. And I was leaving that company after 16 years. And something about that big life transition, I know it sounds weird, but leaving your first company that you worked at for so long was a bit like a breakup. Like my whole life kind of revolved around the people I knew at that company. I worked 50 to 60 hours, so I really didn't have a whole lot of time outside of work. So my work people were really the people I hung around the most. I worked so much. And when I took time off and left that company, it really forced me to reevaluate my life. And I also realized that even though I had worked so much and so hard and long and was climbing the corporate ladder, I really didn't have very much to show for it. And I was a bit burnt out. And that was my big wake up call where I realized I had to figure out all this money stuff for myself and
Mm-hmm.
not rely upon boyfriends or friends or financial advice from colleagues or coworkers. I had to kind of take more ownership and make my own future for myself.
No, I love that story. I feel like that I went through a phase earlier in my career where I wanted to focus on my career, but I knew that there was this money thing floating around, so I let other people manage my
Yeah.
money, but I didn't understand whether or not I was doing the right thing and had the right tax exemptions, and it always kind of like bothered in the back of my mind that I didn't feel like I had control of that piece of my life until I took control. I transferred all of my assets into my main bank account and I started just going through every single file and doing research little by little by little until I understood what was good for me and what was good for someone else and how to move forward from that. I'm hoping that everyone has a little bit of that flash of either when that right time was for them or
Yeah.
when will that right time be to strike for everyone by listening to this.
Oh, no, I absolutely agree. There's a certain point where you decide you're not going to offload it to somebody else. You're deciding you're going to figure it out, and like you said, it's a journey. It's not like you figure out everything overnight. You have to start at some point.
Okay, so what are some of the best first steps that any engineer can take to build a strong financial foundation? I'm assuming there's some baby steps and then some bigger steps that you can take from there.
Yes, yes. No, this is a good question. Definitely everyone starting out, if they're working at a company that has an employee sponsored retirement plan, read up everything about their employee sponsored retirement plan. Understand what is the match? How much do they have to contribute to get this percentage of match? Is there a Roth option? Because for many employees, which a lot of engineers are, we're W 2 employees, the vast majority of us, that's one of the best ways to build wealth. And the earlier people can start and get educated about their company employee sponsored plans, that's their first taste of investing. Even though people don't feel like that's true investing, they are investing. And that's one of the great places where people can start out. So anyone who has a new job, make sure you read up on all that material, get it from your benefits coordinator, your manager, wherever you can at your work, and understand that and take advantage of it at least up to the match. And then number two is, for me, well, everybody I think should be doing this, is understanding where their money's going and having a plan for their money, which in essence is budgeting. All it is you have a plan on paper before the month starts about where all your money is going, and then you are tracking your spending throughout the month and seeing how your spending actually aligns with that plan. It's the most eye-opening thing when people actually do it, because I know it sounds trite where people say spend less than what you make, but that's how you know if you spend less than what you make.
Well, and I think a lot of credit cards these days will help you categorize expenses all into different accounts. So it's not even something where you have to go write down every little expense as long as you go. Use the tools that you have access to in order to help you with that too, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. And there's so much good software out there to do this stuff. I don't even do it manually myself. So when people are trying to do stuff on yellow pads, and there's nothing wrong with that, and they can do Google Sheets or Excel. It's like, make it easy on yourself. There's apps that will connect to all your accounts and show you your spending and categorize it. So I'm a big fan of using tech when possible and apps. There's no need to reinvent the wheel for all these things.
And sometimes when there's some months where I'm afraid to do that, I'm afraid it's going to tell me how many old fashions I drank that week, that month too, though.
Yeah, yeah. But it's the first step. It's awareness of how much you're actually spending and where your money's going. And it's just surprising how much are they actually really spending versus what they make. And there has to be that margin in there somewhere, right? And it's just that spend less than you make and being aware of that at all times. And the other thing is, early in engineer's career, the salary goes up quite a bit, right? And
Mm-hmm.
making sure that it's not just increasing every single time they get that pay raise, because that was one of my other issues when I was a younger engineer. As my career was going through this trajectory of I was going up and up in pay scale, so was my spending. That's why I never felt like I was getting ahead or making any traction or saving any money or really truly investing. So keeping an eye on how much are you spending, even when you get these promotions, raises, having an eye on that too.
Well, and one thing that I was taught is, as you start to increase your salary and as you get promotions, there's going to be naturally things that you're going to want to do in order to make your life more comfortable. But at the same time, try not to inherently change your style of living, because it's easy to have scope creep over time in your life as well.
I love how you use the word scope creep, because that's exactly what it is. I think a lot of engineers can relate to that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
engineers, right?
yeah. So
We have
it's
some
the
scope creep.
requirements change every year.
So, is there any specific tips that you might have for our listeners that are later in their career, of maybe little habits that they can change or think about, even if they're not just starting off their career?
Oh, for the later engineers or more seasoned engineers, they definitely should be more in the investing phase of their career and keeping an eye on what is their nest egg looking like. If they've never worked with a financial advisor, I think that's also a good time where they can invest in one. Maybe early career, they can maybe self manage and do some of their own investments. But as their nest egg starts growing, it might be time to look into getting some financial advice and having someone looking over their portfolio and their investments and all that. And just also redefining this vision for their life. I think a lot of people go along in their careers, and I see it a lot, especially when people hit about that maybe 15-year, 20-year mark in their careers, where they've just been climbing this ladder and working so hard. And then they hit a point where it's almost like a little bit of like a midlife crisis where they're like, I don't want to do this anymore, or I can't stand working for a company, or, I want to be self-employed. And there's nothing wrong with all those things, but kind of having a plan where they're stair stepping into it. And I think the problem is a lot of people, they don't have this vision for their life. Maybe they want to downshift. Maybe they want to go move to a state closer to their parents. Maybe they would prefer to work part time or start a consulting practice and all these things. So I think more the later and mid career folks should be eyeing more of what is this life I truly want? They probably might have the funds to support their lifestyle, but is it just a matter of just still climbing the corporate ladder and making more and more, when really at that point, for some people, more money doesn't really mean more happiness, right?
Hmm.
And there's always also a trade-off for more money sometimes in everyone's career, where it might be more stress. It might be they have to, be on site at a certain location. They might be in a phase where, now the kids are out of the house and they would like to have more time. So I think at that point, they're building less of their career and thinking more about, how do I really want to live my life, and how can maybe this money, hopefully, that they've amassed in this earlier part of their career, more the income earning part of their career, how can that help support maybe this other phase of life that they want to maybe move into? What I think a lot of people desire is maybe like owning a business or starting a business, but then when they understand that they need funds for it, they haven't really built up the funds to do that. It's such a shame, right? But what if they had that like vision 10, 15 years ago, that, oh, there was a point where I would like step away from corporate 9 to 5 and be self-employed or live in another country. But all these options, they can't really happen all the time if people just want to do it next year and they haven't really set themselves up financially for that.
I really appreciate how much that you're focusing less so about making more money and more so about setting yourself up for the life that you want. And that means so many different things in investing. It's so important to understand your goals more so than a dollar amount, right?
Yes, because it's not always just about a dollar amount. People have this like one more year syndrome, another 100K, and what is this taking you towards? And are you just moving the goalpost all the time? Especially with like salaries, that's a very tangible thing where you feel a value from a salary that a company's giving you. So then a lot of people just equate it to, well, I'm doing better if I make more. But
Yeah.
what is that more for if your whole family's, doing well and they're taken care of, and, you don't have to move maybe, or maybe you're allowed to work remote, but you might make a bit less, but this might be better for your family situation. So taking all that into account, where it's not just, yeah, you're right, it's not just about hitting a dollar amount or figure, because no amount of money in your bank account is going to make you feel happy or secure. Yeah.
You can't take it with you.
Yeah.
So, for listeners struggling like student loans or other kinds of debt, how do you recommend that they balance saving, investing, paying off that debt? Like, do you focus on one or the other? Do you do a balance between all of them? Like, what's your advice there?
Yeah, that is a great question that came up a lot when I was at the SWE conference last year. I did not really realize or think about just how many people had student loans, but it's very true. It's a very real, pressing reality that many people will graduate with student loans, and you're right, and they want to get started with all these other financial things. And this is kind of my advice I give to a lot of people. This is where I struggled also personally, so it's not just other people out there. There will be so many different financial goals people have. People want to save money, they want to reduce their debt, they want to pay down their student loans, they want to save up for a down payment on a house, they want to get married, in whatever 3 to 5 years, and they want to save up for that. But to me, there's beauty in just having focus on one goal at a time. Because I found when you have all these goals at once, you don't make any progress in any of them, and then you get discouraged and you're thinking, well, what is the point of me saving money and paying this down, and I'm trying to save for a house and nothing's happening? I feel it's good to focus on one goal at a time, like in this very systematic, serial way. And for people leaving school or early in their career, if they could just knock out that student debt, I think that would open up their whole worlds if they could do that. Instead of having a student debt that lingers around for 8 to 10 years or even 20 years sometimes for some people. I think the average student loan repayment time is 20 years, which is people
That's a
locking themselves.
house.
Yeah, 2 decades of making sometimes a larger than car payment or a house payment every single month. I wish that people could focus on that and truly knock that out even before getting a house. This is the other advice I give people. I tell people, live like a college student for a little bit. You already lived like a college student for 4 years. Can you just live like a college student for 2 years? Can you sacrifice? Because you're going to come out of school making, potentially 70, 80K. and you're going to live like a college student for the next 2 years. So the next 20 years of your life, you can live an entirely different way, that you'll never be in debt again. And if they could sacrifice that little bit up front so they can have the rest of their entire future a different way. The engineering degrees, they truly do ROI, right? That people can come out of school making quite a bit if they can just focus a lot of their salary on that. They're young and they can be scrappy and resourceful. They still have friends that are probably pretty broke. So it's the perfect time to go through that. It'll be this little blip in their story. It'll be the funny stories maybe they tell their kids about eating ramen noodles when they're already an engineer.
Even just 6 more months, even just 6 more months eating the ramen noodles, right? Well, and you
Yes.
said something that, right, I'm a systems engineer as well, is like, let's just systematically take care of this. A little bit at a time, focus on one thing, do it well, get it done, and move on to the next thing. So I think that
Yeah.
resonated with me as a fellow systems engineer. Speaking of engineers, we're problem solvers by nature. What are the best skills that we can apply with that problem solving mindset to our personal finances?
This is a great question. I think this is also why women in STEM engineers are ideally really good at finances. We're one of the top 5 professions for millionaires in America is engineer. And one of them, like you were mentioning in the previous answer, was that systematic thinking. It's that critical long-term thinking. It's trading that short term, sometimes for the long term, and understanding that there's systems and processes, and if you follow them, that you will get an outcome. You can look at an investment calculator, right? And even though we can't guarantee rates of return and all that, and it's all hypothetical, people can understand the mathematics behind that where, oh, if I do this and I do it systematically and consistently and over time and I'm investing no matter what, even when the market's up, even when the market's down, that long-term type of thinking is I'll do okay and I'm not going to worry about right now the short term. They're not reacting so emotionally to these short-term economic events. They have this long-term view, long-term picture. I also think just the planning aspect of most people, that we can systematically plan for the future, that we can evaluate risk really well. I'll give an example of, there's just so much stuff in social media now about, if you just quit your job and your back is against the wall, leap and the net will appear. I don't think that appeals to like lots of engineers.
No,
I think
no.
they need a plan to systematically move into something and to see progress. And they're not just like, oh, I'm just going to quit and be a millionaire. And I don't believe in that either. So I love that like engineers evaluate risk and they can make a plan and they can be strategic and stick with something long term and think about things in this very critical sense. Money can be a very emotional topic, right? And people can be reacting very emotionally to their money and finances, but they can step back and be a little more removed and neutral and see that everything is not so devastating, that it's worth doing these things. We're also really good at sacrificing sometimes, because we go through a lot of rigor and discipline for our education. We have tough careers. Money is also that long journey of sometimes it doesn't seem like it's paying off when you're investing $100 a month, but if you do that long enough over time, you will see it pay off.
We understand the concept of compounding interest and how important that is. And so I can, do some quick calculations to show, like, even though it doesn't feel like it's showing up in the month to month, like in the long term, you can see how impactful that $100 really is just by like popping in a calculator and feeling comfort from that.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, and we do understand the math and the numbers. And I know that some people are really big into mindset and feelings. Sometimes I tell people if you can see it in the numbers first, then the feelings and the emotions will follow. Because you're like, yes, I do see my bank account growing, and I do feel a sense of peace from this. So sometimes I think that also appeals to women in STEM too, that they can see it from a mathematical and numbers perspective. It's not so just a feelings thing. Yeah.
It's all the logic comes into play as well. We've got the real data in order to back it up.
Yes.
I could definitely talk to you about this all day long. But unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our time. Before we wrap up, what's the one financial habit you wish that every woman in STEM would start today?
I think typically most financial coaches would say budgeting. That might be too much. I would just love for people to just track their spending. even if all they did was just track their spending for 7 days, I think it would be super eye opening to many people to just understand where all their money's going and exactly how much they're spending. And I challenge people to do that for just even 7 days. With now all the apps and software or pull the credit card statement, it's even easier. There's like no excuse. People can pull a 30-day bank statement or 30-day credit card statement and pull out some highlighters and start highlighting and categorizing their expenses. And that can help create a first budget. If they don't want to do a budget, at least it creates some awareness about how much they're truly spending and what they're spending on.
I love that advice. And I think sometimes it feels overwhelming to engineers, right? They feel like they have to do it
Yeah.
exactly right. And so, budgets don't have to be, I'm only going to spend $20 at Starbucks. And if I go over, then that's too much. Like they can flex with life and how it goes around. But even just having something simple like major categories, like, all right, what does my budget fall into with 4 or 5 major categories, can feel a lot less overwhelming and can help direct you, right?
Yes, yes, that's all it is. And you're totally right about a budget doesn't restrict you. It's not telling you exactly how much to spend or what to spend. It's a living, breathing document, but it's that awareness, first of all, and then you can make conscious, intentional decisions throughout the month about how you want to spend your money. But yeah, everyone's the boss of their own money.
So thank you again, Sandra. I really appreciated this chat. I'm hoping that all of our listeners had some good takeaways from this. Me personally, I think the most important takeaway is always to remember the freedom and independence that you have of controlling your own money and charting out your own destiny with your own goals and what that means to you.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on. I loved this conversation.
For everyone listening, I'm Karen Roth, your FY25 SWE President, and from all of us at SWE, thanks for listening.